You're listening to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome back to another edition of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor, Frank Saravalli in Philly. And Frank, how much snow you got there?
We have gotten absolutely pelted. You know, I got to tell you, I am walking wounded. I'm apparently not supposed to be around shovels because last time we got 2 feet of snow in the last 2 weeks. And I was out there shoveling and I guess it got icy and I just absolutely ate it, like ass over tea kettle, full on, like could see myself horizontal on the way down, and it was not pretty. And then I was out there shoveling last night and I didn't have gloves on. I don't often wear gloves, and I was shoveling and I guess my hand was cold and I didn't notice, but I got a blister from the shovel, and it just like I kept shoveling so long that it exploded and was bleeding all over me. By the time I came in, it's like a full-blown MASH unit out there.
Who doesn't shovel wearing gloves? Like, wow, that's hardcore, man. It's hardcore.
It's not like me being a tough guy. It's just usually not that cold here. Like the coldest it gets here is kind of like -2, -3, 25-ish. Like that's it. And so I don't really need them that often. Like if it was -2 or 3, would you even wear gloves in Edmonton?
No, but I always have to wear a toque though, because it gets a little chilly on the dome. But gloves, yeah, I don't know. When I'm at the farm, I have to work with no gloves all the time because you can't do anything. But when I'm shoveling, I always wear gloves. Doesn't matter.
Wait, so you touched on it, like the farm. Like I kind of knew you had a farm. Like tell me more about your farm situation.
Well, we've had our family farm since 1973, so basically my whole life. And my dad, of course, passed away 20 years ago, and so my mom's still out there. And I kind of joke, I'm just a hired hand. I'm in charge of all the cattle stuff. And you know, we used to have 75 cows. We actually, for a while, we had more cows after Dad died than when he was alive, which was kind of stupid. But we have about 250 acres, and we just run hay and bale the hay to feed the cows. And the cows is just kind of a hobby farm for me. I love it. So I get to take my son out there. We got some skidoos and some quads, and yeah, so the farm's just that's where I grew up. We had pigs and chickens and horses and everything, full on farmer as a kid. I love it.
So is it just you that runs or operates it? Like who?
Well, my brother, he doesn't really know much of the cow stuff because he was playing major junior hockey when he was 16, so he was never really home in the winter. But he, like the fencing and all kind of the the grunt work, he definitely helps out with. I'm kind of more the cow person, but my mom, like, we've got her a big sit down mower. My mom's 75. She's tough as nails, and so we've got about 3 acres of grass just to mow. So she's got her sit down mower. It's unreal. Like that thing's kind of a toy. So she loves it. But so she does a lot of that in her garden. And then we do have a neighbor, Jay, who kind of helps out on the day-to-day basis. Sometimes my mom needs like a quick fix here or there. But so it's kind of a combination of all 4 of us. And my sister and her 3 boys and husband, they live about a mile away. So if she ever really needs anything, and my nephews are now, 19 and 17, so they can do a lot of the stuff that they need it.
And then what's the end goal with the cattle? Like, are these cattle that
Well, the cows basically, like we calve, it's not a dairy farm, it's just straight beef. So we have a purebred Angus bull, and we have cows. It's calving season coming up in April. And then basically I ship my calves in the in the fall. And, that's kind of about it. But, my mom's going to turn 76 this year. So like, I don't know how many more years we have the cows, to be honest. So it's might be coming to an end, which sucks.
Yeah, that is tough. Now, do you eat, like, is that where you get your meat from?
We'll butcher a beef every now and then. Yeah. Like a side of beef is pretty big, but you have to, usually not, because you have to fatten it up to be a good, 1,000, 1,200 pounds. Right. So back when my dad was around and my brother and I were living at home with my sister, then we used to do it. And we used to butcher pigs and everything. Like, I'll tell you, if you've never had like even fresh farm eggs, people who have never had like fresh farm eggs and fresh cut pork and bacon, like you haven't lived, because it is so much better than the stuff in the stores.
Little known fact about me, eggs, can't do them. Like in any way ever. It makes me nauseous even thinking about eggs. I can't, that's the one food I cannot eat.
Wow. Oh, dude, I love eggs. My son, actually my 7-year-old, he cooked his own eggs this past week. I was pretty jacked up. So
I think it stems back to a hockey incident. I had a kid that I played Pee-wee with that I just remember him throwing up eggs all over the bench one morning, and like I could never do it again.
Hey man, that's fair. I get it. There's certain things in life, like some people, as you get it as an adult, they have a bad drunk one time, and they're puking up tequila and they can't ever drink it again. So I could see that if you were traumatized watching your teammate chuck his eggs up, I could see that.
Yeah, and I hope my wife doesn't end up listening to this podcast, but I remember I was seeing a girl in my early 20s, and she's like, hey, we wake up the next morning. She's like, hey, do you I know you don't like eggs, but you've never eaten my eggs before. Like, let me cook them for you. So I'm like, okay. Honestly, sick right at the, I try to play along. They make me nauseous. I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah. It's a psychological allergy is what you have. It's like with me with onions. If I eat an onion, I'm just gross. I'm not allergic to it physically, but emotionally, psychologically I am.
All right, that's way too much talk about eggs, but I am interested in hearing more as we go along about the farm.
Oh, dude, you know what? I'll get some video of calving season for you, and we'll throw it up on the pod, which is fantastic. Yeah, hey, you know what? You haven't lived, Frank, until you get the big glove on that goes all the way up to your shoulder. Oh. You're going in deep.
Yeah, that's a hard no for me, dog.
And you know what else is funny? This week I had to. My wife and I just the other day had to go in and upgrade our will, because when we got married, we got a will, and we've had our son now and we've never done anything. And I was like, I guess we should put him in the will. I didn't know though that once you have kids, automatically they're going in the will. I didn't know that legally, but it's now that we have a son, you have to figure out, well, if you die, who takes care of your kid? Do you have a will? And if so, who did you choose? Who is the person to take care of your kids?
We don't actually have a will, neither my wife nor I, and it's been on my list. I really should. My kids are 6 and 4, and we're kind of right in that same neighborhood as you in terms of kids' ages, and I just never got around to it. And trust me, that's not me thinking that I'm immortal. If you can see me, I'm no physical specimen or picture of health. So, I should get on that, but I think in the U.S. it's a little different. I don't know if it automatically goes to your kids. I would assume your heirs do get it, whatever you leave, which for me isn't a whole heck of a lot. But in that sense, there's a whole probate court that things have to go through if you don't have it all spelled out. So that's why we really should. And if we had to pick, it would probably be my parents, I guess. Luckily, my parents live pretty close by, 5 minutes away. My wife's parents also live pretty close by, 5 to 7 minutes away. So they're both young and active and involved. And, they did an okay job raising me, I guess. So, I think that would be pretty easy.
It's a battle. Yeah. I chose my brother-in-law and sister-in-law would be the ones who, just because they live close by, they live, in St. Albert where we live, they live about 3 minutes away. So we thought for consistency's sake. But I kind of joke with them. I'm like, because their daughters are, 17 and 15. And I'm like, you start to plan about how life's going to be. It would be the worst curveball ever, where suddenly now they get a 10-year-old boy or 8-year-old boy that have to take care of it. I say that facetiously. Obviously they do it, but it's kind of it's a great thing to give to them, but it's also yeah, here you go. Your parents are enjoying retirement, but now they're going to raise 2 kids.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's the worst case scenario, right? I don't even think about that part. They'd happily do it, right?
Yeah.
And in your brother and sister-in-law's case, they wouldn't even miss you, so it'd be good.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah. Well, plus, they could get the house, so
yeah, true.
That's a big advantage, right? We have a hot tub. I think that's a big selling feature.
I agree.
Yeah. So, hey, let's get to some hockey talk. We have Brantt Myhres coming up today on the show. Of course, was an NHLer for many years. He just wrote a book called Painkiller, and man, this thing is raw and real. And he dealt with addiction for a long time, and now he's been clean for over a decade. And so we'll talk to him just about. And he's very open, Frank. I'm looking forward to this. There'll probably be some. I would recommend to our viewers and listeners. There might be some R-rated sections in that, because Brandt's just going to talk openly and honestly about something that happened during his addiction. So looking forward to that.
Should we let Apple know that this is going to be an explicit content
Yeah, hey, potentially, right? It'll all be honest though, like the truth. So that'll be fascinating. Now, before we get to that, there's a few things I want to discuss. Like here we are. It's what February 19th. The season doesn't end till May. Are we gonna Are we gonna have Hart Trophy talk every day? Does it not seem a little early?
Well, are all these trophies going to come from the North Division? That was the thing I was wondering about. This week, it's like that division is scoring so much more. They've played more games. So if you look at the leaderboards, pretty much, they're taking over the top 10 in every statistical category. It seems like the 7 Canadian teams, and you're saying it's almost like, not do we need different awards, but how do we measure all that out at the end of the season, particularly if we're in a position where certain teams are playing more games than others? It's going to be fascinating to try and wade through that voting process this year. And you're right, I'm a little nauseated since we used that word already. I get it. Auston Matthews is off to a fantastic start, and I'm not slagging him by any means. What he's done has been simply incredible to this point. But really, the Hart, Selke, should we just give him the Vezina as well? I get that he's been fantastic, but geez, it's every minute of every day. It feels like the fawning over Auston Matthews. And can he score a goal a game? What are we even talking about? No, he cannot score a goal a game. Alex Ovechkin is the best. I think he's the best goal scorer of all time. And in his best 56 game stretch in his career, he scored 48 goals, which is incredible. If Auston Matthews could get to 50, it would be insane. 50 in 55 games because he missed one due to injury. But no, he cannot score at a goal per game. Please stop with the nonsense. It is nonsensical to continue talking about. And I am happy to replay this on YouTube and play this clip again. You know where to find it if it happens. And I will sit here and I will eat my words. But I'd be absolutely shocked if it happens. So until then, until we get a stretch where he doesn't score for 3 or 4 games or only has 1 goal in 5, that's the only time this will die off, and it can't come soon enough.
Well, I think we have to blame Joe Thornton. And Joe Thornton, a veteran, because he was the one who brought up the Selke, and now everybody's going crazy over it. But hey, Kane and Martin, Patrick Kane, if we went by the rules of the wording of the rule for the Hart, he might be the favorite right now because Matthews and Martin are on the same team. McDavid and Draisaitl are on the same team. And I know Chicago's probably, they're overrated a little bit because they played more games, but Patrick Kane is compared to those other 4, he's kind of a freedom fighter. He's playing with Priest Suter and, a bunch of guys like that. And no offense to them, but by that wording of the rule, I think Patrick Kane would be getting a lot of talk too, but he won't be.
Oh, hold on a second though. What happens if the Blackhawks don't make the playoffs? Then we're back into the McDavid debate from a couple years ago. Can you have an MVP on a non-playoff team? And
no.
Again, I'm with you. I agree. But that won't stop people from making the Kane case. And I appreciate what he's doing this season. But the Hawks are the 4th place team in that division based on points percentage. And I'd be very surprised if they end up making the playoffs over teams like Dallas and teams like Columbus that haven't played as many games and need to catch up and haven't really been great to start this season. So can Chicago make it? Yes. I still think they're a long shot at this point. And again, I'm waiting to see more.
No, I agree with you, we're totally in agreement on the playoff because my whole thing in the argument is if you don't make the playoffs, if you weren't on the team, you still don't make the playoffs. So your value to the team just isn't the same as somebody who's on a playoff team. Some people can disagree, and that's totally fair, but that's how I view it. You got to be in the playoffs to be a Hart Trophy candidate. It will be interesting, though, Frank, when you mention that if they go to points percentage or games played, because now Florida and those other teams, eventually I think they'll catch up the games because it does seem like the NHL, we saw them rejig their schedule. They're still planning, despite, now Dallas has more games delayed because of the weather. They're still planning to get all these games in by the end of the season. Dallas is going to be playing 4 or 5 games a week.
Yeah, I just don't know how it's possible. I mean, at a certain point, you'd have to think health and safety would be a big part of this. You can't play 10 games in a 14-day stretch. It just doesn't work. And that's what the Dallas Stars would be facing if they get to the point where the regular season was supposed to end on May 8th and the playoffs were supposed to begin on May 11th. I think there's a game scheduled May 10th. Like, how does that work? You could push back the start of that one series, but at a certain point, we're looking at mid-May, May 20th for Dallas probably, for instance, to get in all their games. Hurt at the beginning because they had COVID. Then they finally catch up a little bit. Now they have these power outages and weather delays, and it's been an absolute mess.
Now, I think I just saw the ring. I think Brantt Myhres is ready to come in.
Yeah, let's get to our guest on this episode, Brantt Myhres.
Today on the DFO Rundown, a very special guest. He played 13 years of professional hockey, including, of course, many seasons in the NHL. And now he is an author. He just released his first book. It's titled Painkiller. It's a raw, very truthful read about his battle with addiction. Brantt Myhres joins us. Looking good at the hat, Brantt. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Gregor. Good to see you guys.
Hey, we appreciate you coming on. And man, your book, it was interesting. I read and I talked to you about it. Like, this is something that's been in the works for like a decade for you. Yeah. Why was it finally the right time to release it?
Well, this started a long time ago in my 5th treatment center. And it turned out I was going, wow, I got to give back to the league. They just paid for the 5th rehab, and they were giving me emergency money every month to pay child support and my car payment. I was completely broke. And I thought, man, there's a program here somewhere. So I wrote a program while I was in treatment. And then I started thinking about just sort of a therapeutical process of just writing my life down. And then it just sort of like took on a momentum of its own. I was about halfway done when I got hired by the Kings. And I said, well, I don't want to be releasing this while I'm employed by an NHL team. So I put it on the shelf for 3 years. And then when the job ended in LA, Penguin Random House called and said, hey, we heard you were writing a book. Would you like to finish it? And I said, sure. And so that's what I've been doing the last couple of years.
You mentioned 5 treatments. So like, this book it's very open and honest about your battle with addiction, Brantt. So we kind of got to go back to the start. You grew up in Alberta, and then you played in the Western Hockey League. You're a tough guy. You're also a skill player. Your last year a junior, over a point a game guy. But you kind of made your way to the NHL as a tough guy, and that's a tough role. So was the enforcer role what helped you? Did you have to drink or do drugs to do the job, or was that not related to really the base of your addiction?
Oh, it had a part to play for sure. I mean, I have a daughter that's 13, and my first fight was against a goalie at the Portland Winterhawks camp. He was a backup goalie. And I was 15. I was listed by the team. And we went out to center ice, and he left his blocker on the bench and his helmet and everything. And there I am squaring off with the goalie. And, as a 15-year-old, I mean, that's traumatic. And even though I did well in the fight, that set me up for my 16-year-old year. And my dad told me that I had to lead the league as a 16-year-old in fighting majors. So I did. And it started from there. And then I didn't really get into much alcohol, actually, because I was 16 playing in Portland. I couldn't get into a bar or anything. But when I got traded to Lethbridge, that all changed the next year. And I found that when I'd go out the night before a game or after a game, my head quieted down. Especially as a 17-year-old year, because then my dad said, okay, well, you led the league as a 16-year-old. Now you have to lead the whole Canadian Hockey League in fighting majors if you want to get drafted. So I did that, and I had 40-some fights as a 17-year-old. So I think it started really early, and if you were to take away alcohol from me at the age of 17 and told me to get sober, I would have quit hockey.
Why do you say that?
I couldn't have done that role without medicating. There's no way. There's no way that I could have, as my brain's not even developed. And here I am as a 17-year-old trying to deal with fighting in front of thousands of people, fist fighting with bare knuckles. Not only once, but I can fight 3 times a night. And then we're going into Saskatoon and Prince Albert on Friday and Saturday. It never ended. And it would have been too overwhelming for me not to reward myself with partying, or however you want to call it, after the game.
And how accessible was it in junior hockey? Like how readily available could you get your hands on alcohol? And then how did you transition? How did you find it and make your way to drugs after that?
Yeah, so the alcohol, I mean, our favorite place after a practice at 2:00 when we get to practice, I think right before school ended. And then at around 4, we'd head out to Boston Pizza, the lounge in Lethbridge. And then we'd go to a country bar at around 7. So of course alcohol was easy to get. My first experience with cocaine was I went to a place called Peach Fest, which is in the Okanagan.
Oh yeah.
And I was at a bar, and one of my good friends says, "Hey, come into the bathroom." And I went in, and he took me into the stall. I'm like, "What are you taking me into the stall for?" And he pulls out this white stuff, and he rolled up a dollar bill back then, and he said, "Snort this." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "You don't need to worry about what it is." So I did, and I'll never forget, as I was washing my hands, I opened the door to go back out to the dance floor. And as I'm walking out to the dance floor, I felt like that scene in Saturday Night Fever where he's walking out and he's got his hand in the air and he's pointing and he's dancing. And it was the most incredible feeling I've ever had in my life. And I was laughing, dancing up till 6 a.m. And I said, wow, I said, if this is what this makes me feel like, this is another thing that I'm never going to give up.
Brett, did you have an addictive personality? Was that part of it? Because a lot of people would be scared to try drugs.
Yeah, but Gregor, look at the way I was living I was basically a gladiator at 16. You think I was scared of anything? I mean, like there was no way that, you could have put me in any situation. And I was trained at that point to go in with no fear.
So I have to assume that somebody in junior hockey, a coach or GM, like some people must have known that you were, maybe drinking and then doing drugs, or when you got to pro. So was there somebody who took you aside the first time and said, "Hey, like we got to try to rectify this"?
Yeah. So there's a story in the book about the Magic Mushroom Motel in Lethbridge, and the brass heard about that, and our GM was a guy named Bob Bartlett. And Bob calls me in, and I was 17 at the time, and he said, "I heard about what happened last night at the Mushroom." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "And you got that all going, eh?" I said, "Sort of." And he goes, "Well, I'm going to send you away to your agent's place to go get your head straight." So I got suspended from the team for a week, and that never made the news. Like they never reported that. So it started at 17, and then, I mean, man, oh man, it never ended.
I've talked to you before, and I've written, Brantt, a little bit about, some of your darkest moments and, your realization, for your daughter that you needed to get clean. But I don't think we ever really touched on how you were able to get through daily life as an NHL player and a pro player. Like, what was a typical day like for you in the life? Like, what was your sort of cocktail, so to speak, to make it through the day?
Well, game day or non-game day?
Game day.
Oh, game day, I never fucked with booze or drugs. I mean, I was drunk from the night before, or really hungover, but I never drank on the game day. So my game day was the same as any other players who was after the game or on, days off the next day where it got ugly.
And do you think your teammates at the time had a sense? Like, did the team know what you were doing?
Oh yeah. I remember when I was in Philly and I was sitting next to Koff in the practice room, and he called me Knuckles. And I walked in. I had these two girls drop me off a block away from the practice rink because I didn't want anybody seeing me get out of this piece of shit car with these two chicks at 8 a.m. I walked in and he just came and sat down and he just said, "Holy shit, Knuckles." He goes, "You smell and look fucking terrible." He goes, okay. He goes, obviously you can't skate today in practice. He goes, so what you're going to do is as soon as we get out on the ice and we do our warm-up laps, you're going to do one lap. That's it. And then you're going to say that you pulled your back. So I did. I got out there. I skated. I could barely even do the one lap. I said, shit, I tweaked something. And then I went back in the trainer's room. And so guys knew, they weren't idiots.
And you got a guy like Paul Coffey, and he'd probably seen a little bit of that. Like, the 80s and the 90s are a lot different, I think, than the game is today, both on and off of the ice. But did you ever have, because you mentioned you went to rehab 5 times, Brantt. Yeah. So when was the first time? Did you put yourself in? Did they force you to go? Talk about the first time you go into rehab.
Yeah, so I believe how it went was we were playing Pittsburgh the night that Lindros got smashed by Kasparaitis. And then we played the next night in Philly against them. By this time, Clarkie has already warned me twice that if he catches me drinking another beer, he's going to release me. So after the game the next night, I went out to this little watering hole. It was just a little lounge, and I went in with my suit on, and I took my hat and I put it on really low, and I sat in a corner, and I ordered 3-4 beer, and I got up and I went home. The next morning, Koff calls me at 7 a.m. He goes, Nux. He goes, did you see the paper? I'm like, no. He's like, well, they put you on waivers. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I get there and Clarkie goes, so he goes, you think you're pretty sneaky, hey? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, last night, he said one of our head scouts was at this lounge. And there you were in the corner drinking beers. Because I told you I wasn't fucking around. He goes, I put you on waivers, and he goes, you're going down to the Phantoms. And then I went to the Phantoms, and the head coach was Bill Barber. And within, I believe, 2 weeks, they pulled me aside. Paul Holmgren said, okay, we got a call from Clarkie. Get your stuff and get the fuck out of here as fast as you can. We want you nowhere near our hockey team. They went on to win the Calder Cup that year. And I called instantly the next day to the league. I didn't know who to talk to. I just phoned and said, I need help. And that's when Dan Cronin called me, flew to Philly, and we flew to Los Angeles for my first treatment center.
So it wasn't really the Flyers. Like, you look back on it, and I don't want to blame anybody for anything else like that, but probably not the best way to deal with an addict is to give him an ultimatum, because you couldn't stop, right? I'm sure if Bob Clarke said, hey, stop, it wouldn't have been that easy.
Well, no, they told me twice. So did Wayne Cashman. And I was playing with my idols that I loved and looked up to, and I'm playing for the Flyers, and I still can't stop. I didn't know what alcoholism was back then. I thought it was a willpower thing. I didn't realize it was a disease that I was suffering from. Until I got into treatment, and they're like, yeah, you got to do this, and then we go to AA meetings every night, and I'm like, AA, is that some type of transportation company, or what is that? They're like, no, it's a recovery group. So I'm like, oh, okay. So it was all so new to me at 24, and I fucking hated every minute of it.
So you go through multiple times, as you mentioned. Can you take me to, your last trip?
Oh, yeah.
And how in that night, and you knew you needed to go again?
Yeah. So today's the 19th of February. Yesterday was my 13-year sobriety date. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So it happened yesterday, 13 years ago. So I had a Coke dealer that I called every time I wanted it for a year and a half. And if anybody knows about cocaine, if you're drinking and you start getting drunk, if you do a little bit of Coke, you sober right up. Anyways, I joke about it saying the Coke dealer saved my life that night because he wasn't returning my calls, and I was at my sister's for a dinner with my cousins. And I just went into the fridge or the freezer, and they had these airplane bottles in there. So I just started drinking them, and he wouldn't call me back. I didn't have any drugs at that point. So the next thing I know, I wake up. I just remember, my face was in the snow, and I had my hands behind my back, and these cops had their knees in my neck, and my sister was screaming. And, I get in the back of the cop car handcuffed, and I'm like, that fucking bitch. I'm like, she got me arrested. And they're like, whoa. They're like, Brandt, we asked her if she wanted to press charges. She said, just take him home and put him to bed. So I get to bed, and I wake up, and I call her, and she said, you're never allowed in my house again. She said, the kids were hiding in the closet. You had a butcher knife out, and you had it pointed at your stomach. And and she said, you kept saying, do you want me to, I should just do this. I should just do this. And then I grabbed her by her throat. And that's as soon as I grabbed her by her throat, her husband, Donovan, called the cops. And so when I woke up, I've never blacked out before. I lost total control, and I got on my knees and I just started saying a prayer. And I cried for a while, and I had a feeling this voice was just saying, you're finally done. Like, it's over. And I got up. Dan Cronin called me and said, we heard about what happened. Are you willing to go to long-term treatment? And I said, yeah. So I got on a plane. I believe it was the next day or the day after. And I didn't know how long I was going for. I thought I was going for a month, but I stayed for 8 months.
8 months. Well, I mean, what was your longest stay before that? And how'd you do 8 months?
Well, they talk about in the program that you'll go to any lengths to stay sober. And I was willing to go to any length. And the longest time inpatient treatment I ever spent was 90 days. And every month the owner would come up to me and he'd put his hand on my shoulder and he'd say, we're going to keep you another month, Brandt. And I was, fuck, man, I was just so grateful. Like, I had nothing left. And so, and my daughter was born a week after I got into treatment. I couldn't see her. And they'd send me pictures of her, and I just, fuck. It's emotional for me because it's such a hard day. Like, it was, and then the 90-day mark hit, and I was feeling good. And then they said, we're going to keep you another couple months. And then at 6 months, they said, we're going to put you into outpatient treatment for 2 months, and you get to go home. And that's how it started.
And so during that stretch, that's when you write this program that you decide that you can help other teams. Yeah. How, you said, I think you said you started with 50 pages. How did you put it all together, and you get a team like the Los Angeles Kings that hires you, and, walk us through what that experience was like and how you
well, that didn't,
the Kings.
Yeah. I mean, that took 6 years of, so when I went back to school in Calgary to get certified, I went back, and I every year on my sobriety birthday on February 18th, I would go to the FedEx box, and I FedEx 4 of them to the NHL and 4 of them to the PA. And I heard nothing for years, but I did it every year. And I was in LA, and I was watching practice. I don't like to watch hockey, but I was down there. My buddy Andy Sutton was with me. And Daryl Sutter walks out, and he's like, Myhres. And I said, oh, hey, Big D. And this is literally, if he doesn't, so I shake his hand and I say, okay, well, it was nice to see you, Daryl. Talk to you later. And as I'm walking away, he says, hey, do you want to go see Dean? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. If he doesn't say that, my course has changed. So I turn around, I walk back up to Dean's office, and we're talking. And as I'm leaving, I said, hey, Dean, I said, I've made a program for the league. I go, I don't know if you're ever interested or whatever. I said, I can email it to you. And he goes, yeah, that'd be good. And then I didn't hear anything. And a year later, once the arrest happened, that's when I got a call. And then I flew to LA, and we had it done within a day.
Brandt, just listening to you talk and about your anniversary and everything that's gone on with your family. I did read in your book that you and your sister, have reconciled, thankfully, and she ended up having a painkiller addiction of herself, and she overcame that without the kind of the support that you had. So she's a pretty strong woman for sure. You can just hear the emotion for you, and so I would assume when you got involved with the Kings, like when you were talking to those players, like everything they thought they could do, you probably were like, dude, this is the minor leagues. Like, guys, I've done it and I've seen it and I've done it 10 times worse.
Oh yeah, and that was they didn't know me though, Gregor. They didn't know who Brantt Myhres was. I remember, and it's in the book. I was in the trainer's room with 10 guys, and Drew Doughty was on the training table, and he goes, "Hey, he didn't call me Myhres at that point. He's like, hey, Brantt." He's like, "What kind of player were you? How many goals did you get? Big goal scorer?" I'm like, "No, dude." I'm like I got paid to protect plugs like you. I'm like, Nah, I wasn't a goal. But it was the first time in my life where somebody in a dressing room didn't know that I was a fighter, or what I did. And I'm like, whoa, I got to start from scratch here. And so it took a while, but it ended up working out.
Was that better though? Like, I don't know because I think most guys, they really respect the fighters because 99% of people couldn't do the job. They weren't tough enough or weren't willing enough to do it. So did it help you break down the barrier that they didn't know who you were, so you could just kind of show them, who you are now, rather than them watch YouTube of you fighting as a crazed guy in the 90s?
Well, I think what helped is the LA Kings, I believe it was towards the end of my first year, they did a black and white video, and they explained, because they were doing these film things every month or something, and they did it on me, and I think that really set into the players now. Oh, lifetime ban. Oh, rehabs. Oh, NHL fighter, whatever. So they got to see a little mini clips of what I was all about, and I think I gained some instant credibility at that point. So it sort of just eased the room, if you'd say.
So you go through your experience with the Kings, and the first thing that slaps me is how reactionary this is instead of preventative. Like, it's not until they have arrests that you then get hired, and then you go through your course with the Kings, and a new GM takes over in Rob Blake, and all of a sudden your services are no longer needed. I guess there's no arrests to that point. Everything kind of quiets down a bit. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think this league is reactionary instead of preventative?
It's a good question. Again, it's definitely not about the money. I mean, they can't say, "Oh, it's financial. Let's get real here." I don't know. I just, that was a situation that I didn't really understand, and it's okay. Like, I didn't really want to wrap my head around it too much. I felt really proud of what I did for those 3 years. Again, when it came, the league has a lot of, they spend a lot of money on other things, for sure. So for something, especially financial, as small as that, if you can get the right person that has the right credentials to do that, I don't know if there's a downside to it. I didn't see it. So that was hard for me. But it's also a role, like Dean said, I've got to do reports on everybody every couple of weeks. I got to give them to our, president or, it goes back to the owner. And with you, we don't have any. And he goes, "But I get that." He goes, "This is a program based on confidentiality, so of course I can't give reports." So I was in a weird position, having, who do I report to? Well, if I don't report to anybody, it's a great year. So maybe that was part of it. I don't know.
Do you find that there's still a stigma attached to it, to talking openly about addiction and alcohol abuse? And I mean, just hearing you be so open about it, it hits me how rare it is. But let's be real and have some real talk for a moment. There's still plenty of guys in this league, and not to mention, as you pointed out in your book, in the minor leagues, that are prospects for these organizations that still have these very real problems. Like, they're not going away. So why why is there a stigma attached in addressing them properly?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those things where, like, when I left the Los Angeles Kings, I went home and I waited till the playoffs were over about a month later, and I sent out 23 proposals, 23 no's. You know, I don't know if they feel if they hire that position that they're admitting that they have a problem. But again, this is a you know, something that's not a reactionary situation. Like, why not have something in place just in case something happens, you know, and it's going to happen. Again, as I mentioned, you've got your East Coast American League and your NHL squad. And I got to tell you too, guys, I wasn't only working with players. Like, now you've got staff of like 20 people. So I was working with people that weren't putting skates on for a living. So again, it was a bit of a heads. I'm not a general manager. I respect their decision. But at the end of the day, I write something where I said, if you took all 32 GMs in a boardroom, and I wrote out the program and said, here it is, guys. Here's how much I get paid, and here's what I do. Can you guys go up to the chalkboard or the board and write down a negative aspect of this program? And I honestly don't know what they'd write down. I don't know.
Yeah, Brantt, I read that in the book, and it is interesting. Like, I think society in general is, you know, some of our worst secrets we don't want to talk about. We feel if we can keep them, you know, down below, then no one has to mention that. And, you know, in your book, you had something similar to that when you were a young boy at 11 years of age. Charlie, a big brother, you talk about that, and, you know, he's kind of a predator, and how you didn't want to tell your stepfather because you knew he'd probably get the shotgun out, to quote you, and take care of it. So, like, I think you really understand how a lot of times it's just natural to not want to talk about the ugly side of reality.
Well, Gregor, let's put it this way. So let's say, Gregor, you're making $5 million a year, okay? And you can either talk to one of your employees that is responsible for signing your checks, or you can talk to me. And me and you have a bond because we're going through the same thing, and I have a responsibility and a commitment not to say a fucking word to anybody. Who are you going to call? It's no different than if I had a Bob Probert that had 10 years of sobriety in the NHL working with the San Jose Sharks. Who, if you don't think I would have used Probert, you're kidding yourself. I had nobody to turn to, and I'm not going to turn to the doctors. I'm not going to turn to Dean Lombardi or anybody else that's going to say, you know what, that 650 grand you're making, this conversation might fuck that up.
Yeah.
So no way. And that's why it was they tried to have my position in LA where Dean goes, okay, your office is nowhere near upstairs. You're going to be right next to the dressing room. And in the program, I staged it out. And my one-on-one meetings, I staged it 1, 2, 3. And the first, here's the 2 stages, guys. You guys got lots of opportunity to talk to me and work this out. But if you don't comply in stage 1 and 2, well, I got to bring in Dean. So it was laid out pretty good for them to understand that they could talk to me about anything, and I couldn't say anything.
And I know that there was one case where Dean Lombardi, because you couldn't tell him, he just asked you, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was it? You know, one of the players that, you know, basically was yelling and screaming with a girlfriend, and I don't know if it got physical. Obviously, you can't tell us, and I respect that. But when you're in that situation, Brantt, and, you know, you're talking to these guys, can you kind of give us an insight of just, you know, how much anger and maybe fear and everything that goes into it, that, you know, there is a lot of pressure to be in pro hockey, whether you're on the ice or even in, you know, off the ice scout, whatever it is. And that, you know, sometimes, you know, people just, they don't have anyone to talk to, and then it just builds and it builds and it builds, and then eventually it explodes, and by then it's too late.
Yeah. And I think that's like any system, really. I mean, it could be the guy that's working at Canadian Tire with 4 kids back home trying to support, you know, a family, making $25 an hour. I mean, there's pressures all over the world, and you see people lose it. And it's no different than a young athlete. But going back to Dean, it was great that he was so mad that he couldn't ask me who it was, and but he respected it, and that was really the only way that it was going to work, you know. And sometimes with these kids, you know, I met with the player the next day, and we had a nice talk, and I just explained to him, you know, okay, here's what we're going to do, and he was awesome.
So Brantt, aside from the book, and congratulations, it's amazing to get that out and to see something so honest and forthright, you know, bearing it all, so to speak. What's your plan? Like after the book, you know, you're going to celebrate that and help promote, but what do you want to do next?
Well, for me, I've, you know, financially, number one, I don't need to sell a book. Whether I do or not, it's never been about the money. So, I would like to spread the message. I put my heart and soul in this thing, and I think that it can help a lot of people, whether you're 14 struggling with an addiction or, you know, you're 60. So I've got a really good publicist in Toronto, and she's going to work with me over the next 6 months in booking speaking engagements. And for me, that'd be my new career. I want to give back.
Do you think there's a future, you know, for a program like this, whether it's working with one team, a division, working for the Players Association? Like,
well,
I'm surprised. Why is no one taking you up on the program? I had
an interesting call yesterday from a guy named Jim Thompson.
I know Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy's awesome. He owns a junior team in Ontario. And he said, Brantt, he said, I read your book a couple days ago. What I've done is I've ordered your book for all of my players. And he goes, they have 1 week to read it. And then we're going to do a Zoom call with you and 25 of the players. And they each get to ask you a question about the book.
Oh.
And I thought that was brilliant. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, who knows if it's going to plant a seed? I hope it plants a seed with these young kids. But just to have, you know, it's one thing to say, hey, call my team and talk about the book. It's another for these kids to read it and get into it and try and pick my brain on why I didn't stop after the second rehab making all that money, or the third or the fourth. So I thought that was a pretty cool initiative.
Oh, Brantt, I love that idea, man. We'll have to get you back on later to kind of, you know, in a year or two, or see how that's going. Quickly, where can people get the book Painkiller?
Oh, honestly, anywhere that you buy your books. I mean, Amazon, it's Indigo, it's at Penguin Random House, pretty much anywhere that you can get a book.
And do you have a picture of you looking as trendy as you do right now in the book?
Let's see here. Well, it's funny because it took us about 4 months to do the cover, and I said, hey guys, here's the deal. They go, what? I go, I don't want my face on this thing. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, I don't want to be anywhere near it. I go, and nothing against any other hockey book. I said, it's not a hockey book. It's different than a hockey book.
Yeah.
So let's not put my face on there. And so there's a couple pictures of me in there, but you got to dig in the middle.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, now before we let you go, we always have something we like to do called rapid fire on the show. We got a clock going. Just quick rapid answers. Some fun, some serious. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start out back, and this is maybe a tough one, but back in the day, it's 13 years you're sober. What was your drink of choice?
Oh, geez, Jack and Coke.
And right now, what is your beverage of choice today, 13 years sober?
Favorite drink, 5 Alive peach flavor.
Ooh, okay. The best trait of Daryl Sutter?
Compassion.
The toughest guy you fought?
George Larocque.
Your favorite NHL goal?
My first one against Ron Hextall.
Oh, I love it. And what was the best advice you got during rehab?
We don't have to catch you altering urine tests. You're going to catch yourself.
Ooh, awesome. Brantt Myhres, this has been fantastic. One of my favorite guests here on the DFO Rundown. We really appreciate it. All the best success with Painkiller. I recommend everybody reads it. They'll love it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Brantt, congratulations on your success, and thanks for being so real.
You betcha, guys. Have a great day today.
You too. how emotional it was for him to talk. Like, got me emotional. I love that. Like, I hope that other teams recognize the importance of what that role could bring.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting it to be so emotional just because he's talked about it and written it so many times that you would think that, by now it's kind of, and I don't want to say rehearsed, but like you can tell how painful everything was. I mean, painkiller is such an appropriate term in so many ways for the name of that book. And it's painful to read too, like just to think all that he had gone through, the toll that it took on his family. It's difficult to digest, but man, we talk about this league and how reactionary it is. I hope someone takes him up on his offer, because this isn't just some guy that's lived it. This is someone that's certified to help people and has gone through training, not to mention the life experience that, so many of these players aren't even scratching the surface on. So, whether it's the NHLPA or whether it's a team or even some, Brantt Myhres is assigned to the West Division. So whatever it is, he can help in so many ways. And let's not kid ourselves. There's a real problem that still exists, whether it's painkiller addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's something off ice, financial. He can help talk to you to get you to the help that you need. So I just appreciate his honesty and how open he is.
I look at it and, listening to what Jim Thompson's doing with his junior team and having those young guys, like, hey, if that's the new path for Brantt, that one might be just as impactful, if more, because he can touch so many people. Because I love what he said, how this isn't a hockey book. There's so many people in society that have addiction problems. And the great part is it's inspiring to see someone who went through it and came out the other side, and that it is possible regardless of where you're at, in your life. It took Brantt 5 times to go to rehab, and he finally got it on the 5th time. And I think that's what's inspiring about it and makes the book so real. And I don't like to read an entire book before I have a guest on, because I feel sometimes that I know too much. So I had the book, I skimmed a few chapters, and now I can't wait to really dive into the entire thing.
The old Larry King school of interviewing.
Yeah, I guess so. But that was fantastic, and I love it. And before we go, because I do want to do a big shout out to Hockey Helps the Homeless. That's why I'm wearing the shirt here. Today you can help out. Usually they have these big tournaments that go on and a lot of people playing them, but obviously because of COVID they can't do it right now. So you just go to the hashtag Canada Life Cup Champ, or if you want to donate to help out the homeless, you can just text the word hockey to 20222. $5, $10, whatever you can, to help them out, the homeless. It's a big problem anywhere we live in society. And this year, unfortunately, we're not allowed to have those type of tournaments where guys like Brantt Myhers and other NHL alumni volunteer their time for. So hopefully this can get a little bit of awareness.
Hey, I was beaking you for your shirt earlier in the week. That rainbow thing was horrendous. This one is looking A-okay on you.
Awesome, Frank. That's a great addition of the DFO Rundown. I look forward to our next guest, who I think next week's going to be Haley Wickenheiser,
the Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's great. Till then, Frank, have a good week and make sure to wear some gloves when you're shoveling.
Yeah, will do.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Saravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.